Looks like we made it. We're now in the season of Lent. It started earlier last week on Ash Wednesday. And Lent is a period of 40 weekdays and 6 Sundays where in joy and in sorrow the church proclaims, responds, and remembers the atoning death of Christ. And Lent can mean many things to different people. Some people give up something for Lent as a sign of their faith in God. But the more I thought about it, the more I began to realize that life and Lent are about our struggles, how we deal with them, and what we're going to do about them. Today we hear 2 temptation stories. The first one is the temptation of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And the other one is the temptation story of Jesus as he was led into the wilderness by the Spirit to be tempted by the devil. We've heard these stories countless times, and there are many different ways to look at them. Some people say that Adam and Eve temptation and the Jesus temptation are on opposite ends of the spectrum. They say that there's no relation between them. I would argue that that's not true. I think there's plenty of relation between them. Some people say that, Adam and Eve were evil and bad, and Jesus was good. I think there's truth there, but I think it's a lot more detailed and less simplistic than that. I believe there's a lot more going on here in these 2 stories. We begin to hear about Jesus, who was tempted in the wilderness by Satan. And we think about those words. Jesus was tempted in every way as we are. I think that's really good news for us this morning, because it says that Jesus knows us and has experienced life like you and I do each and every day of our lives. Jesus, in a sense, then, is the second Adam, if you will. Because of his death and resurrection, in faith, we, though we are sinners who fall short of the glory of God, are transformed, redeemed, and forgiven through the actions and efforts of Christ himself. And both of these stories teach us a lot about awareness and self-knowledge. Awareness and self-knowledge. A little bit more about that a little later on. Back to the story of Adam and Eve. They eat of the forbidden fruit. So what happens next? What happens after that? What happens? Think about it. Their eyes were opened, it says. So what does that say? What does it say to us? It says that they were eating with and seeing with closed eyes, a partial seeing, maybe a blindness. There's something about eating the forbidden fruit that opened their eyes. Eating the fruit gave them a new awareness, which awakened them, giving rise to a new level of consciousness. They would experience life in a new way, as did God. They'd be like God. Adam and Eve, therefore, after they ate of the forbidden fruit, knew that which was good from that which was evil. They knew that life would be different. With that knowledge also came some things. They saw what was beautiful and wonderful. They also saw pain and suffering and everything in between. Their life would be changed. It would become more difficult, complicated, and real. But I thought about that some more, and I thought, we have the same kind of experience. We go about our daily routines, we do different things. And all of a sudden, we do something that doesn't seem right, doesn't make sense to us. We kind of go on, and all of a sudden later, wait a minute, I get it now. I see. That is what we're talking about here. That going through an experience, not being sure what it was, and then later on, figuring out what it was. We need to become more self-aware. And as I just said, self-awareness has some good things and some bad things and a lot of great things in between. It's really important for us to think about that. It wasn't as easy as just saying no. We can say no to a lot of things, but we need to be stronger in who we are and, more importantly, whose we are. In a real sense, again, there's that consciousness which guides us in ways to see God even more. And with this new experience, we see our world, ourselves, others, and maybe even God in a different way. And like I said, when we stumble and fall, which we do, we begin to see God's presence even more because we realize what we have done and what has happened. It makes us more willing to confess and feel God's pardon and presence in our lives. Again, it's not enough just to say no. The garden experience brought Adam and Eve to self-knowledge. And by the same token, if we look beyond saying no, we can see Christ's experience brought him a whole new certain self-knowledge as well. Jesus, as he was tempted in the wilderness, became more and more aware, became more and more of his relationship with God, and also about the presence of Satan in his life. And after Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, the devil left. And before this, he was baptized. He was baptized, and God said to him, "This is my son with whom I am well pleased." Jesus goes into the wilderness after being told that he is the Son of God, and God is well pleased with him. Imagine what that must have felt like, to know that he was pleased, God was pleased with him, and that he was God's son. This only helped him see, understand, experience, and deal with the things that he would. He began to know and understand even more the gentle beauty and power of God's grace. It seems that grace always precedes us. Through this self-knowledge, Jesus began to know who he was, that to whom he belonged, and what his message to the world would be. His experiences would be shaped by his experience being tempted in the wilderness by Satan. He began a ministry then of healing, preaching, teaching, and love. He knew who he was and what he was about. And that is what God brings to us even today. He tells us who we are and what we are about, and what we are about to do. If the wilderness is the place where Jesus learned more about himself, God, the world, and others, and if the failure in the Garden of Eden to say no was a place of knowledge and learning for Adam and Eve, could this be possible for all of us? Could it be possible if there's this realm of knowledge that we are seeking? Self-knowledge is not something that is limited. It focuses us and helps us to focus on our life in faith and our life with Christ. It's about who we are and, more importantly, whose we are. Self-knowledge leads us and guides us back to God. It's always about going back to God. It allows us to see that self-knowledge takes us further than self-denial. Now, self-denial is important, but not as high a priority as the self-knowledge. The story is told about two pastors. One was just starting off in ministry, and the other had been in ministry over 40 years. The younger pastor was new to the area and wanted to learn more about being a pastor. So he contacted this older pastor to talk. And they would talk by phone once a month. And usually the younger pastor would call about this situation or that situation and how to deal with it. The older pastor would be a mentor to the younger one. These two pastors, again, would speak at least monthly by phone because there was a lot of distance involved between where they lived. And the young pastor would call the older pastor, usually with a question, especially if he was not sure again what to do in a given situation, or when life in his parish got really hard, challenging, or difficult. As the conversation, fellowship went along and grew, the older pastor would ask the younger pastor two questions. First one, what are you learning about yourself? And the second one, what do you need from me? What are you learning about yourself? And what do you need from me? What would happen? What would happen if we raised these very same questions of ourselves during this Lenten season? What would happen if we asked those questions? What are we learning about ourselves? And what do we need from God? Those two questions during our Lenten season. I think we'd see a Lent like no other. We'd be more holy, more focused. I think we'd gain more trust in each other, more trust in God. We gain more resources, more strength, and more knowledge. Again, what are you learning about yourself? And what do you need from me? That might prove again to be a most interesting Lenten season. It might truly be the start of a holy Lent and a holy Lenten season. Again, I think those questions are so important. Let it be a time in which our eyes, our hearts, and our spirits will be open to and for the truth about ourselves, again, who we are, and more importantly, whose we are, and what we are to do. This Lent might leave us with things both done and those things left undone, where we rediscover, and yes, maybe even hear for the first time, that we too are God's beloved children. And He can be well pleased with us in our life and journey. Again, it is about our calling to reach out to others, to help people in need, and to grow spiritually, personally, and professionally. That to me is part of what Lent is all about. Again, we are God's children. And it's so important for us to hear this message today because it guides us in our journey. It helps us to do more than just say no. Again, maybe, just maybe, we would have a time of Lent where we quit scorekeeping and making hasty judgments. If we really think about this kind of Lent, it will lead us to a new life, a fuller and more blessed life than ever before. It will be a life in which we discern the very glory of God. We can glorify our Lord through our genuine, authentic, and self-knowledge and self-reflection through prayer, purpose, and action. Have you ever thought of yourself as be a person who can glorify God? Maybe, just maybe, it's about time to start thinking, feeling, believing, and experiencing the way that God knows us, for He knows us far better than we know ourselves. He knows all the things that we are capable of doing, the good, grand, loving, and beautiful things that we can do. Again, this is time of Lent, time of reflection, prayer, thought, and action. You know, we might speak, think, and act differently. Someone once said that the glory of God is a human being fully alive. Think about that, being alive, alive in the Spirit, alive in the Lord. There's no telling the possibilities we could unfold, and the potentialities are beyond imagination. So again, I come to you in closings this morning, asking you those two questions. What are we learning about ourselves? And what do we need from God? Think about it. Pray about it and act upon it. And you'll see a new Lent and a new life. Amen.